Good afternoon. I'm really pleased today to note that we have with us Professor Yotam Kramer, one of our professors of psychology and the professor who teaches counseling, abnormal psychology, and related courses. Welcome, Yotam.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to be interviewed by you and to talk with our students.
It's fascinating to find ourselves, you, me, and others at McDaniel still in touch, even under these circumstances of the COVID-19 outbreak.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Actually, I'm doing quite well under the circumstances, I must say. So, like everyone else, I'm spending much more time at home with my nuclear family, which is mostly great. Of course, I spend much less time with other members of my family and friends, which is mostly, again, perhaps negative, but overall I'm doing quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm lucky enough to be able to keep on working. So I teach online and I also keep on with my practice as a psychotherapist online. So that's a bit different, but overall my life hasn't been changed as much as perhaps for other people. Maybe that helps me to keep the positive spirit that I would like to share with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, so tell me, now that you're working online, teaching online, and also, like you said, continuing your practice as a psychotherapist, what are some of the things you've noticed? What are some of the observations you've made?
All right, first of all, in the first week or so, I think so that's about 1 month ago, everyone was really preoccupied with this virus, this unpredicted changes in their lives. I guess that there was a lot of fear about what's going to happen, and that really that was the content of my meetings with my clients. But what I feel now is that the vast majority of my clients are somehow finding their ways back to normality. At least the content in our meetings is really about topics that we have worked on before with the coronavirus. And I think that it's giving some reasons to be optimistic, and it also feels that these individuals, or most of them, somehow have a strong identity, and after adjusting to that kind of shock that they've been through, they feel that they're just the same people, and they would like to keep on going to the same directions they were heading before everything happened. But saying that, I think that there are two topics that actually I would like to discuss today.
Mm-hmm.
Which are present perhaps more than ever these days. And the first one is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one might be called depression, but I would like to address it from a different angle, an existential psychology angle that sees depression more as something like lack of purpose or lack of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
For many of us, the meaning of our lives and the purpose of our lives have been changed. So, for example, some of us are just waiting for the summer vacation or to getting somewhere or to achieving something, and all these opportunities, or for many people, these opportunities have disappeared, and they found themselves a bit clueless about where they're heading. So I would like to address these topics.
All right, well, let's start with anxiety. Especially in this particular circumstance, what can you tell us about how people are feeling anxiety and how they should respond to it?
All right. First of all, I would just want to say that we're having an interview now, but it's not to replace psychotherapy or counseling. So if someone needs help, I can recommend, first of all, there are a lot of resources on the internet. For example, the American Psychiatric Association website. I think that we will send a link for that, which have a lot of very useful resources, as well as hotlines if somebody would like to talk. And of course, we have our own counselor, Viktor Somogyi, and you can also approach me if you need to. So don't take this interview as something which is instead of getting help.
Mm-hmm.
But I will try to give some tips. Nevertheless, perhaps they can still be helpful. So let's begin with anxiety, as you suggested. Anxiety is an emotion or a physiological response that can manifest itself in many different ways. So it can be seen just as someone who consumes news without stop. I think most of us tend to do that these days. And it can go towards being worried without ability to really control our thoughts. And even it can affect us physiologically, so fatigue or high heart rate, high blood pressure, sweating, difficulties in breathing, even panic attacks. So there are many ways for the anxiety to express itself in individuals, different severities, I guess. But I think that most of us do experience some amount of anxiety. And I would like to introduce two schools, psychological schools that have been proven to be very, very successful dealing with anxiety, especially in a short-term intervention. So we try to do something immediate that will just help our listeners. The first one is the behavioral school. So behavioral therapy is a school that tries to focus really in changing the behaviors of the individual. And the idea is that you change the environment, and when the environment changes, also the behaviors of the individuals might change. Of course, we all know of many behaviors that might be helpful. You can think of different sports that are relaxing for people, yoga, relaxation techniques. For example, we'll give a link, but there is a progressive relaxation technique, which is called progressive muscle relaxation. That might be very helpful. It's a 10 to 15 minutes routine that I suggest to do maybe once or twice a day, if you feel that it's helpful for you. Yeah, we can think about many behaviors: reading, listening to music, talking with friends, playing games, taking a walk if it's possible where you live. So all these behaviors can be helpful. But if you really want to employ it in a very efficient way, I think that maybe a good idea is to try to monitor your anxiety level. So that will be the first step. For example, you can create a diary where every 4 hours, let's say 8, 12, 4, 8, and 12, you write down a simple number from 0 to 10 that represents your anxiety level. So you'll have 5 moments at each day where you write your anxiety level. And then you try to write down maybe the activities that you do during that day. And the idea is to find correlations between your anxiety level and different activities. So for example, if you understand that every day at noon, your anxiety level is at the highest point, and you know that in the morning you tend to sit in front of the internet and read the news, and in the evening there is somehow lower anxiety level, and on this time you usually talk with your friends or do something else, it's a good idea to try to change your daily routine. Of course, to decrease activities that increase your anxiety and vice versa, and also maybe change the order of these activities. It's a good idea to start your day not in a very high anxiety activities. So maybe to start your day with a walk or with talking with someone, and to try to follow the news later on, and perhaps do that for shorter periods. So again, monitoring, finding correlations between behavior and anxiety, and then changing your daily routine to decrease your anxiety. So that's one method that I think might be very useful. It's again, a behavioral method. And the other school, which is very efficient, is the cognitive school so the cognitive psychology school. Cognition means the way that we perceive the events, our thought process, the way that we think, and what we're doing after we thought. Yeah? And I think here an important term is catastrophizing. Yeah, so we have this. When we are anxious, we have a tendency for catastrophizing, meaning that we pick up only negative information. We tend to ignore positive information and to pick up negative information, and then all the time to follow these worst case scenarios, basically, and to just imagine what will happen if the worst will happen. And one thing that is might be very, very beneficial. First of all, I think it is a good idea really to check what is the reliability of the information that you're getting. Yeah, so no one should really follow internet sites that are not reliable, and there are many of these. And this catastrophizing tendency found itself everywhere on the net. So to be aware of that and to just pick up the right information. But also a nice intervention might be to try to pick up 5 positive news every day. So it's not hard to do that. There are some internet sites that give only positive news, which might be actually very beneficial. Maybe we'll put some links for these as well. I personally read these. I really enjoy to get some positive news these days. But also on every internet site, you can find positive news. For example, these days, there is decrease in the number of causalities and new infections in Italy and in Spain. Some countries are thinking of opening their borders, or at least are opening their workplaces. Let's begin with that. There are some ideas for medicine or vaccines. So you can always find many positive news items. And I think that if you will try to pick up 5 every day and to write them down, in a few days you will have a long list of very positive and optimistic views regarding coronavirus. And then when you feel that you are getting into that loop of catastrophizing, when you're starting to think about these things and worst case scenarios, it's not a bad idea just to pick up that paper and to read these positive aspects, and that can help you to get out of these loops. But anyway, just the activity of picking up five positive items every day, I think is very helpful.
That is really interesting. And in fact, if you could include that information, then we will provide a link. And let me add, this might be something you're not yet aware of, but we have as you might know, we have among our physical education courses a yoga class. And the instructor of our yoga course is Professor Andrea Shandor. And she is going to start offering a yoga session online for everybody next Tuesday. And then every Tuesday from 11 o'clock. So at least you and her seem to be on the same wavelength. And I encourage anybody who watches this interview to join the yoga group. You know?
I will be there with my kids.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for reminding me of that. Let me ask you then about this other topic you were interested in exploring, which is depression. And as you said, the kind of unique way you wanted to talk about it. So could you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'm teaching now counseling psychology, and we're talking about the existential psychology. That's why I'm focusing on that. But I feel that it's really helpful these days. So existential psychology school, one of the founders of existential psychology, his name is Viktor Frankl, he's well known. And he was a Jewish prisoner in Auschwitz death camp. Yeah, so he was under the worst circumstances one can imagine, actually. And there he started to develop his theory because he was surprised to see that despite this unthinkable circumstances, still most people around him were functioning, were not clinically depressed, and did find some happiness and purpose in their life. Yeah. And what he realized is that what distinguishes between people that becoming depressed and others that somehow can keep functioning despite the situation, what differentiates between these two groups is finding a purpose in life and meaning in life. So for some of them, it was taking care of someone else that they loved. For others, it was a small business that they ran in the ghetto. Some hoped maybe to see somebody that they love, which wasn't in the ghetto. And for some people, it was just being loyal to their own values and attitudes in life. So for example, some religious people really found that as long as they pray in the evening, they have a meaning in their lives. And he actually quoted Nietzsche that said that if you have a why, you can bear almost any how. Yeah, that's from German. It's a free translation, meaning that if you have a reason to live, why, you can somehow live under any circumstances. And that is a very central narrative in existential psychology. And if I try to take it from a philosophical level, perhaps to a much more practical level, I will say that during that time, many of us have lost their purpose. I said it a bit earlier, and feeling that they're just like going through the time without waiting basically for the whole thing to change. And I will suggest that instead there is an opportunity here to remind ourselves that we are free. We are still free to decide what we want to do in that time, who we want to be in that time, and maybe to find some purposes and meanings. This can be in many levels. So if you think about the personal level, one can decide that maybe it's a good time to learn how to play the guitar if you really wanted, or maybe to master a song if you already plays. Maybe if you think about sports, to do as much push-up as he wants, or to become better at yoga, or there are many personal things that one can think of. Reading a book that was waiting for a long time, or writing, or learning to some new art abilities. In the interpersonal level as well, maybe reconnecting to people that you haven't talked with for a long time. Improving your relationship with an important family member or someone who's out of your family, maybe talking about a topic that was hard to explore, but maybe it's the right time to do that. And one thing that can give us motivation is to think of yourself in a few years, looking back at these days, and imagine that you can tell to yourself, okay, it was not easy, this coronavirus thing, but actually in these moments I started playing the guitar, and it's such an important activity for me today, and that gives me, so one might have a warm corner in his heart for this period, even though it's hard, yeah? And again, I'm not saying that I'm not trying to portray a picture in which this is great, what's happening to us, and we are happy about this virus. No, this coronavirus really reminds us how much we cannot control our life in many ways, and a lot of kind of tragic facts about our lives, and it's not easy to deal with that. But on the other hand, we always do have a large amount of freedom for us to try and find some purpose, some meanings in our lives. And since we cannot do anything about the global picture and to change things related to Corona, I suggest all of us to focus on our personal lives, where we can do actually many things always, and to try to change it for better.
That's a really kind message for you to share, really, and I'm very personally touched by it. Just to even to contemplate the exercise you suggest of thinking of how you will view this situation 4 years hence, and what you will say about what you did. You know, it's a fascinating exercise to consider. Well, Yotam, thank you so very much for your time today. I know you're actually pretty busy with your family and with your practice and teaching and so on. So for you to share a few minutes for the larger McDaniel community and the others who might see this interview is really quite generous. And I would like to remind everybody who's listening that there are links to counseling options. Students and others can reach out to our mental health counselor, Mr. Viktor Somogyi. Also, as Professor Kramer has suggested, you can reach out to him for, if you have any questions or concerns. Like you said, if someone is feeling very anxious or suspects that they might be depressed and is very troubled, it's important to take steps to try to begin to tackle the problem. And with that, I'd like to thank you again.
Thank you, Professor Adamson. It was a pleasure.
So all the best with your online teaching, and let's do it again sometime.
Okay.